Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I was asked a question about the picture of this building. I'm not sure where this building is, to be honest. I found it somewhere and then I used it. So anyway, let's talk about big data and privacy. And we are discussing that for our big data and privacy or big data privacy lecture for week 4 of this class, DS 650. And last week we talked about data protection, ways to protect your data, and we're going to talk about privacy here. And again, as every week, I've been reminding you of the definition of big data. And again, I mentioned that big data is a set of data that are large and complex, right? They're collected daily or even by minute from different locations and different sources like social media sites, from IoT devices and so on and so forth, right? So we talked about that. What is big data? Now, what is privacy? When we talk about privacy, we are talking about the unauthorized or prevention of unauthorized intrusion. So knowledge that information deemed personal or confidential that will not be shared with unauthorized groups or entities. So this is basically the freedom from being observed without consent. So keeping your data private, keeping your credit score private, keeping your name. I mean, your not your name, but your maybe political opinion, things like that, or keeping your maybe email address. Sometimes people like to keep their email address private, but it's not very easy right now to do this. It's very, but also maybe the purchase history and things like that, like your consumer purchase history. So there are a lot of things that people care about. Your credit score, maybe you want to keep it private from certain entities, but not from others. So your social security number, that also people care about, that keeping that private. And there is always a risk of the data privacy when storing data on the cloud. So what does that mean? It means like when you store your, let's say all your files on your locally on your computer, or you are basically pretty much have some kind of control over who has access to that data. But when you do it on the cloud, there are other means of keeping that private too, but you're also storing it on somebody else's equipment, somebody else's server, and so on, like Google and Microsoft and so on, right? So the concerns regarding privacy and protection of data in the age of big data are on the rise. More and more people are being concerned, have concern about the data that is being collected about them. So if you have a social media account, for example, you probably are concerned about the stuff that you do online, right? All your activities online, things like that. Your browsing history, your likes, dislikes, and so on and so forth. So in the US, there are federal data protection laws, and as many other countries also have similar laws. We're going to be discussing later on about other European laws like GDPR, Global Data Protection Regulation. But in the US, we have federal data protection laws, and those are sector specific, right? When we talk about the federal law, what does that mean, sector specific? They focus on a particular type of data. So for example, you have HIPAA, which is Healthcare Portability and Accountability Act, that try to protect your privacy when it comes to healthcare information. And yes, these slides are actually on Blackboard. So I was asked a question about that. And you have things like the Driver's Privacy Protection Act of 1994, and then you have another example of the Video Privacy Protection, and then you have the Cable Communications Policy Act of 1984. There's other more other laws that deals with privacy when it comes to federal laws. So you have each of the federal laws. You don't have one federal law that deals with everything like we have in Europe. For example, you have GDPR. So by the way, these slides have been updated. So if you have downloaded them from Blackboard before I updated them, you can go back and download the updated slide. And so we talk about personal information. Personal information, what does that mean? It's sometimes referred to as personal identifiable information. What does that mean? It means information that can identify you as a person. Like I said, your name, home or email address, physical characteristics, the ID number, like your driver license number and social security number and so on. So that's the personal information. So like I said, some of the examples are names, home or email address, ID number, physical characteristics, consumer purchase history, and so on. Information. Then you have some sensitive information. They are personal information, but they are kind of sensitive, like your medical record. That's why we have HIPAA as a federal law that deals with protecting or keeping that private data private. And then you have financial information, racial or ethnic origin, political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, trade union memberships, and so on and so forth. So now we talked about there are personal information classification. So when we say the higher the security level of the information, the fewer number of people should have access to it. So basically means that if it's highly secure data, then you should not have too many people have access to that data. So what does that mean? Like we talk about, if you remember, we talked about data protection. I talked about how you can keep that classified data classified and keep people from getting access to that data by different means. Like, for example, if you have, like, let's say you go to a doctor's office and you have some kind of medical information that you don't want people to have access to it. Of course, the doctor's office, they're not going to be mailing you the record like your exam results, test results, anything like that. They might not be emailing it to you, so you might end up having to, like, let's say, log on to encrypted site with a strong password and multi-factor authentication that prevent other people from actually getting access to that information. So that's just one example. So some of the information classification levels, you have a public, which is has the lowest security level. Public information is like, your home address, that anybody could actually find that online. Any other information like that might be public. Even if you go, like, your name could be public on social media site, so that's has the lowest security level. But you have another level of information classification, which is business confidential information, and that's level that's a medium security level, and it's intended for authorized personnel. And then you have secret, which is the highest security level, and that's intended for the most sensitive information. So when you say secret, means it should stay secret, and mean nobody should have access to it except with authorized people. So why is privacy important? And one of the articles I actually posted for this topic is talk about the private information. Why is privacy an important business issue? So because if you lose business personal information, that could lead to some, like, bad consequences for the organization and for the individual as well. So imagine someone has access to your personal information, like your social security number and things like that, driver license number. They might be able to steal your identity and do things with that information. So, and also that's why we have laws that, like, for example, the GDPR in Europe, for example, they talk about, the laws involved with like, if, let's say, hackers are able to breach the data of the organization have to notify the individuals about that. So misusing the personal information, like a credit card number or a birth date, can also lead to unauthorized purchases and so on, right? So there are the classifying information. There are three primary categories of information. You have public use, internal use, which is like inside the organization, and then you have restricted. Restricted could be like a government organization that has a restriction on data that only a few selected people have access to that data. So that's restricted, like secret, right, weapons and so on, right? So you talk about here, this table shows you like the public use when you're dealing with external network. transmission, like if you're going to transmit that data to public data, like through the wires, like or Wi-Fi, there's no special requirements. It's public information. So if somebody captured that data, it's not a big deal, right? And for internal use, allow remote access only with VPN. So if you are trying to get into a network from your home, for example, they have something called VPN, which is a virtual private network, which creates a kind of secure encryption or secure network. And then you have confidential, where you have when you have confidential data, you are basically one way to keep that data in confidential. You can encrypt the data when it's possible. So there are different encryption ways of encrypting the data. So for example, you encrypt it while it's on your hard drive. You can also encrypt it while it's being transmitted. Like for example, if you go to a bank, website to log into your bank account and do financial transactions, that process going through the bank website is encrypted process. So the website itself has to be encrypted, and so regulatory handling encryption where technically feasible and allow remote access through VPN and multi-factor authentication. And if you have like data that are public, but they are located on like portable devices like PDAs, or there also no special requirement because it's public data. And same thing for internal use. But if it's if you have like the website, like the public data on a website, there's no special requirement. So if you go to a website that is not encrypted, you can transmit public data on that website, right? Like for example, reading CNN or BBC or any of those news websites that you can read, that's the public information. There's no need to encrypt that data. But if you're doing any kind of financial transactions on those websites, like going to a bank website, that need to be encrypted. And if on a website, if the data is going through internal use, you can do that on something called intranet. Intranet is basically like opposite of internet. Internet is like accessible from anywhere. Intranet is only accessible on the company network. So you have to be either on the inside of the organization, inside the building, or you have to log into VPN to get to that site. So now the security administration, we also briefly touched on that last time. Top secret information is the highest level of classification for information on a national level. So a lot of the government organizations, they use this kind of classification: top secret, secret, and so on. Secret, such materials would cause a serious damage to national security if it were publicly available. So it was available to the public. And then you have confidential, such material would cause damage or be prejudicial to national security if publicly available. Now restricted, that will cause undesirable effect of publicly available. And if it's official information, that such materials forms the generality of government business, public service delivery, and commercial activity. If it's unclassified, that's technically not classification level, but this is the feature of some classification schemes, and it's used for government documents that do not merit a particular classification. So again, talking about confidentiality, because when we talk about privacy, we need to understand these three terms: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Especially confidentiality, protecting the information from being exposed to an unauthorized party. So you have confidential data, like for example, you're sending a message out, maybe a kind of a secret recipe or something like that, or something that you want to discuss with someone but you don't want other people to see it. That's confidential information. And there are different ways. Even there are tools available to actually allow you, if you have regular email like Gmail, you can implement those tools where you pay more money for it, where if you use that tool along with the email account, it will encrypt your data and make it confidential. And then we talk about also integrity, which is protecting data from being modified. So if I say hello, then the message comes to you in an email, should be hello, should not be anything else. So that's what we're talking about. The data should not be modified, and it should not also be misused by anybody that is unauthorized to make that, to take that action. And availability, making sure the information is accessible to authorized users. So you can do that through different means, like backing up the data to make it available in case, let's say, the original data failed or crashed or corrupted, then at least have a backup copy. You can also do things like you have multiple servers and so on. You have multiple uninterruptible power supplies. So if the power fails, then you have additional power and things like that. That's what we talk about when we talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay. Now, there are multiple ways that big data analytics can invade personal privacy. So when we talk about data analysis, if you analyze data, there are different ways that can cause them some privacy issues. One of them is called discrimination, and that's a risk. So when you use a predictive analytics, and we're going to be talking about that in a separate lecture about the different types of analytics, predictive and so on, right? But for the predictive analytics for determination on individuals, so you can use data to determine if someone is, if you can actually make decisions about someone, if they can, you can rent a house to them and so on. So the use of predictive analytics by public and private sectors can be used by the government and companies to make determinations about, our ability to fly, find a job. So, we'll talk about the fly, a good example of that. Even they can look up your social media and they predict, and they can make decisions based on that, find a job, obtain a clearance, or get a credit card. The use of our associations in predictive analytics to make decisions that have a negative impact on individuals can lead to discrimination. Another risk or another way that can lead to invade personal privacy, the big data analytics, is something called the embarrassment of breaches, which creates public awareness by exposing personal information, identity theft. So the examples of that include data breaches at multiple well-known retailers, restaurant chains, online marketplaces, government agencies, universities, online media corporations, and the recent hack that not only put unreleased movies on the web, but exposed the personal information of thousands of employees. So public awareness about credit card fraud and identity theft is all-time high. So more and more people now are aware of these issues, and not everybody take actions right away, but a lot of people are aware that these things happen. Whether you decide to take actions about it or not, that's a different questions. But another thing is that also abolishment of anonymity. So removing only a few data sets can lead to re-identification, even though the data might not exactly tell us who you are. But so, like for example, cookies or cache on a browser, but you can remove some data, and that can lead to re-identifying the person who they are based on locations, IP address, and so on. So without first determining if any other data items should be removed prior to combining to protect anonymity. So it's possible that individuals could actually be re-identified with the anonymous data. Another way that the big data analytics can invade personal privacy is government exemptions, collecting and adding more and more personal information to government databases than ever. That's including the FBI, which collects personally identifiable information, or PII. That's what PII stands for, and including names, race, sex, data, and place of birth, social security number, passport, and driver's license number, address, telephone numbers, photographs, fingerprints, financial information, like for example, bank accounts, employment and business information, and more and more. So, if you remember, there was a data breach a few years back regarding Equifax, which is a company that hold multiple data sets about millions of individuals in the United States. And when hackers were able to breach that database with maybe about 200 million people, if I remember correctly, a lot of the data about these individuals includes like phone number, social security number, history, employment history, physical locations, and so on and so forth. So that's a lot of data can be collected about one person. Now we talk about data brokerage and the sale of unprotected and incorrect data profiles. Numerous companies collect and sell consumer profiles that are not clearly protected under current legal framework, and that data files used for big data analysis that can also often contain inaccurate data about individuals, use data models that are incorrect and they relate to individuals, or simply be flawed algorithm. Data misrepresentation. Having more data is no more substitute for having high quality data. While one can find countless political opinions on social media, these aren't reliably representative voters. So people sometimes look at like certain sites and they look at like different opinions and they make a final decision on based on that, but that's not really reliable to make decisions like that. So you can look at Facebook posts, for example, but that doesn't mean, like, for example, talking about the presidential candidates, and you having more posts to talk about like one candidate over another, in favor of one candidate over another. That doesn't mean that candidate is going to be the winner. That's just not really a good representation. So now, personal privacy and social networks. You apply the reasoning from case studies to more personal ethical issues. You have things like cyberbullying, and that's basically humiliating, taunting, and threatening, invading someone's privacy online. And of course, we have options now on social media, for example, where it allows you to report such activities, and you can actually, if those legitimate reports, then they sometimes they end up blocking the person that is taking such bad actions. And so things like sending sexually explicit messages of or images using cell phones or tablet computers, privacy expectations for public postings to social networks. So there's really not really much privacy available there on social media networks, because once you take action there, there's no guarantee that that data, even though they're like, for example, Facebook and other social media sites that might allow you to change the settings to implement more privacy. Like, for example, only allow people that you are a friend with that can see your posts and things like that, but doesn't mean that someone cannot take a screenshot or share that data, or share that opinion, or share that post that you posted to other groups. So there's almost no privacy there. So give us some cyberbullying examples here. This person committed, her name is Megan Meyer. She committed suicide after being harassed on MySpace. And this was just an example there that, was bullied on social media. And then the information posted to Craigslist, another example, led to a young girl receiving sexual phone calls and emails. So so the laws lag behind this problem. I mean, there's a lot of, it's basically, there's not really, a lot of times things happen and people get in trouble, but not really that much trouble. So the First Amendment protections complicate the issue, because, you could argue this is my First Amendment rights, and I can say, whatever I want and things like that. So there's a lot of legal things involved with that. So again, talking about here, sexting between consenting adults is legal, but the image is intended to be private between two people, but it doesn't mean it's always going to stay that way, right? How many times you hear of stories where people communicate privately, but then that private information or private communication ends up leaking to other groups and other places. So so you have to be really careful with that when you take actions online. Whether you do it on social media sites or blogs or websites, anything like that, comment, anything you post. So the privacy expectations with public postings online. So you have, for example, here students posted nasty story on MySpace about her hometown. She deleted that post 6 days later, but the hometown high school principal, they saw the story. They gave it to a local newspaper, and local newspaper printed that story. Printed the story, and the family of that student was threatened and lost business, and they had to move out. So the courts found that she should not have expectation of privacy when making a public posting on MySpace. So just there is already a legal decision being made about that. So so you have to keep that in mind. So now we talk about you need to assume that anything that's sent to or posted online, might not stay private. Even if you post it on private group, it may become widely distributed and become public, and it might even last forever. So even you might end up deleting the post. How many times people get in trouble? They wrote something on social media, they deleted it, but then it came back years later and hunted them and got them in trouble. So because somebody saved it, somebody took a screenshot of it, somebody recorded it, and so on and so on. So it's kind of hard to, once you do something, once you say something, it's kind of hard to kind of go take it back and make that private. So the basically, so the advice here is, the recommendations here are to, if you don't post something, if you don't want a large number of people to see it, right? And you would be embarrassed to have it widely circulated. For example, your parents, employers, and so on. And the materials could be considered libelous or defamatory. So if you think that material that you posted could be, you could end up being sued because of posting that, just don't post it. And unless, of course, you don't care. And the information is private, of a sexual nature. So these are some of the examples, some of the things that you should not post. This is actually, you can watch this video. It talks about data brokers selling your personal information. I provide this link to you to watch it on your own time. And this one talks about the future of your personal data privacy. This is a good TED talk that was very powerful. You should watch as well. So a summary here, that computer technology intrinsically involves new social and ethical issues. Ethical reasons provide framework for analyzing ethical issues. And so we talked about actually privacy. We described what privacy is. So private information, why you should care about private data. Why is it important to have private information stay private? Because we gave you some examples. If data get lost or stolen, it could lead to financial damage, financial loss. And for organizations, for example, it could damage the organization's privacy, organization reputation, brand of business, relationship, and it could also lead to legal liability, and also the mistrust of the business as well, an individual that has their private information leaked. There is a term called the ontological reasoning, which focuses on intent rather than the outcomes. Ethical issues with information technology includes copyright protections in an era of file sharing. So personal privacy and lawful intercept laws, hackers who claim to be social good, and privacy and the protection of personal information. We talked about cyberbullying, example of that. So these are some of the things that I have provided, some of the articles that go deep into privacy issues. You should read those, and then I'll let you now go ahead, and if you have any question about that. If not, just tell me if you have any question about the topics, any feedback, anything you want to do to